dismantled to build a wall that has since been destroyed. In addition, bombing later damaged part of the Parthenon, Erechtheion and Propylaea. Since the 19th century, many groups have tried to revive the various monuments. But where the ancient Greeks excelled, the first restorers failed. The last restoration campaign, still ongoing today, began in 1975. Scientists found that many mistakes had been made by their predecessors.
In 1975, the monuments of Acropolis were in critical condition. Then work began, and the blocks were dismantled to remove the damaged parts. We gradually realized that there was a lot more damage than what was visible from the exterior.
Dedicated to the glory of the sacred goddess, the Temple of Athena Nike is particularly revealing of the clumsiness of the restorers of the past. For lack of adequate methods, they made many mistakes when laying the marble blocks.
Determining the position of each block is a painstaking process, and various parameters have to be considered. The height, the measurements of the block, but also how the block is cut, meaning that the cutting tools must be chosen extremely carefully. It's like a puzzle that needs putting together.
In all, 3 campaigns and 2 complete dismantlings were necessary to rebuild the temple to its original state from 2,500 years ago. The last restoration work was completed in the early 2010s. A total of 42 of the building's 327 blocks had to be switched back to their correct place. Right next to the Temple of Athena Nike, the Propylaea were also restored extensively. In so doing, scientists were able to discover new construction secrets of the ancient Greeks. When scientists set out to restore the Propylaea at the beginning of the 20th century, they had to replace some of the marble blocks that threatened to collapse. When dismantling the structure, the restorers found that the joints contained no traces of mortar to bind the blocks to one another. However, they discovered strange cavities containing iron pins dug into the marble. As a matter of fact, all of the rectangular blocks contained these cavities filled with iron elements. These pins were used to connect and reinforce the blocks. The ancient Greeks then poured molten lead into the cavities in order to protect the iron from corrosion. This ingenious system was proof that the ancient Greeks knew how to give their monuments perfect stability. This was a vital aspect, as the Athens region is located in one of the most active seismic zones in Europe. The ancient Greeks also concealed ingenious earthquake-proof devices at the very heart of the columns of the buildings. The timbers of the columns were connected to each other by a system of wedges called empolia. and wooden pegs called polos. This system made it easy to align the tamburs during construction, but also acted as a flexible joint. In the event of an earthquake, the columns could move slightly and absorb ground movement. But the tamburs remained solidly in place and allowed the structure to remain standing. "2,500 years after their construction, the front columns of the Propylaea still stand at the entrance to the Acropolis. Others, such as those of the Parthenon, had to be partially restored. More than a century after the first restoration campaigns, the Acropolis teams continue to work tirelessly. These sparkling white colossal stone monuments continue to amaze anyone who looks at them. However, the surfaces of these buildings were not always so pristine.
We knew that the Parthenon and all the monuments of the Acropolis had colors. We knew it from the literature and from color representation of 19th and 20th century. But we didn't know that these pigments and the polychromy still survived. So as soon as we had the access in the upper parts, we had this great surprise that the polychromy still remained in the marble surface.
In 2012, during a new phase of restoration of the Parthenon, scientists gained access to previously inaccessible areas. This was particularly the case on the southwest side. Under Ottoman occupation from the 15th to the 19th century, this space was occupied by a mosque built inside the Parthenon itself. Today, the remains of the minaret of the mosque are still present. Notably, a staircase that leads to the highest walls of the Parthenon. Here, the walls of the old tower covered the marble of the column capitals for nearly 5 centuries, protecting them from bad weather and light. In 2012, when scientists examined the site for the very first time, they dug an opening into the wall of the mosque. That's when they discovered tiny traces of pigments.
And here? This demolition that happened in the masonry revealed the polychromy still existed in the post block. The more intense color that we see in this member is this blue-green pigments. It was the paint color of the body of the leaf. Here we see behind the crusts. And we see black lines that corresponded to the background of the pattern of the leaves. And again, blue color here. And these black lines were repeated every 16.5 centimeters, like here and here and here.
These subtle remains are hard to discern with the naked eye. In addition, certain parts of the walls are covered with a thin black layer that is formed over time. But highly sophisticated devices can help reveal the most discrete colors.
By using this portable microscope, we can see better the pigments that we can see with the visible eye, and we can record it. And now we will see the colors magnified 30 times. And you see that the pigments are in contact with the marble and behind the crusts that happened because of the decay of the centuries. Everywhere the pigments are behind the crusts. Maybe here. This is the black line. And we can see the perpendicular line. This wonderful blue.
Thanks to chemical analyses, archaeologists were able to confirm the presence of blue, green, red, ochre, and even black. These priceless remains, kept out of sight for nearly 500 years, bear witness to the various colors that once adorned the sculptures atop the columns of the Parthenon. The work of the scientists is still ongoing, but it allows us to imagine the appearance of the Parthenon during antiquity. The building used to be decorated with colorful friezes designed to make the sculptures more visible to the visitors looking at them from the ground. In reality, all the buildings were decorated this way. Notably, the Erechtheion and its 6 caryatids, statues of women that serve as columns. Thus reconstructed, the colors reveal the splendor of the temples of the Acropolis. To build the temples of the Acropolis, the ancient Greeks extracted and moved no less than 100,000 tons of marble, the equivalent of almost 10 times the weight of the Eiffel Tower. Then, in just a few years, they were able to erect structures just as monumental as they were refined. 2,500 years later, the architectural prowess of these builders continues to impress the entire world.
We admire the know-how of the ancient Greeks, both for the cutting of the marble and the construction of the temples, but also for the design of the monuments and the calculations of their dimensions. This clearly required a certain genius.
The quality of their work and their ability to build these exceptional architectural structures with such precision are extremely impressive. It's no coincidence that monuments such as the Parthenon are part of the world's cultural heritage.
For nearly 2 centuries, archaeologists have tried to revive these monuments and understand how the ancient Greeks managed to achieve this architectural feat.
The thing that's really impressive about the ancient Greeks is that even though they're living in a distant time period, they're able to build these monuments that still survive today better than a lot of modern buildings that have been built more recently.
To this day, researchers continue to ponder some of the methods used by the ancient Greeks. Started in the 1970s, the renovation of the Parthenon forges ahead, and the building hasn't yet revealed all of its secrets.
Architects discovered that some of the building techniques that had been used by the Athenians were so advanced that they couldn't even be imitated and replicated with the use of computers. And it really seems difficult to understand how this was achieved.
Some 2,500 years after construction, the marble of the Acropolis still holds many mysteries. Some of the monuments, like the Parthenon, will probably never be completely rebuilt. Nevertheless, they remain age-old testaments to the exceptional know-how of the Greek builders.